It's that time again to get the violins out. That's right. Prince Harry has lost his bid for UK security after moaning he'd been singled out and treated less favourably than other royals. Excuse me. I'll just wipe my eyes. Sorry. Sorry. The Duke and Duchess of Sussex were stripped of their round-the-clock protection after Brexit in 2020. It's just a shame that now the taxpayer will have to spend even more money on his appeal. Let's hear the thoughts of former head of Royal Protection, Mr Dai Davies, and TalkTV's Royal Editor, Sarah Hewson. Sarah, let me start with you first, if I may. This was another court case, another loss for Prince Harry, as he likes to be called. It seems to me that he spent about as much money on this case as he won from the last case that he didn't get very much money for. And meanwhile, it's costing us a fortune.
Well, yeah, we know that the fees for the Home Office in November of last year, so they're going to be higher than that, but the latest figures we had were for over £400,000. Prince Harry's now going to be liable for those fees as well as his own. But he's not giving up because he has said, having lost his case at the High Court today, he has made it be known that he is going to appeal this and he will take it to the Court of Appeal. As we've heard so many times from Prince Harry, the fight goes on. He maintains that he should be entitled to round-the-clock security available as and when he needs it, that it should be automatic, his right to police protection. But the High Court said today, no, Ravec, the committee that makes the decisions on royal and VIP security, was right. It was justified and lawful in its initial decision that was made, 4 years ago now, back in February 2020, that the situation had changed. He was no longer a working member of the royal family, and therefore it wasn't in the public interest that he should have that full police protection now.
Yes, exactly. And Dai, let me come to you as a former Royal Protection man and a royal historian as well. I mean, the way that some people are reacting to this, you'd think that Prince Harry had been abandoned completely and utterly by the police and by the government and by his own family. But he will still qualify, will he not, for protection, depending on what he's doing when he comes here.
Well, hello, and you're absolutely right. Yes, this does go back 4 years. And of course, at that time, he had departed to Canada. He still had royalty protection for some time while he was there, but I think somebody decided enough was enough, and then off he went to California. Yeah. But you're quite right. When he comes to this country, as has been evidence in his last visit, you could see he was well protected. And even though he hadn't given 28 days notice, quite rightly, in one sense, he got that protection because he was here almost on royal duty in the fact that he was seeing the king. So, yes, you're quite right. He will get it when the circumstances are right, when circumstances dictate there is a risk, if indeed there is a risk. But as with all members of the royalty, there is a risk. But it's a question of where you put your resources. Yes. Those men and women who protect the royals are tasked by the government, by us, to put their lives at risk, to protect those this country deemed to be at risk. Ravec is well established. It is comprised of knowledgeable men. As far as I know, they're all men. There may be women. But what I'm trying to say is they're very, very experienced people who wouldn't take these decisions lightly. Against them is Harry. And as I've always said, there's Harry's truth, and then there's the real truth. What have we got to determine in this case? That the real truth has prevailed, I hope.
Well, exactly so. And I'll come back to you, Dai, in a moment, just to ask you about the niceties of how these decisions can be made sort of in the future and when he does come back. But, Sarah, let me come back to you, because one of the things that his lawyers said was that he was being treated unfairly, as if he was being singled out. And it seems to me to be very kind of symptomatic of Harry's view of the world, that, you know, he thinks everyone's picking on him, he thinks he's having a rough time, he thinks it's all everybody else's fault, and suddenly he's the victim once again. And that's the part he's playing. He's also saying that his children will not feel at home in Britain unless they can be protected. Well, if they don't feel at home in Britain, maybe he shouldn't have left Britain.
Yeah, and it's an argument he's been making for a long time that it's not safe for him to bring his family back to the United Kingdom at any point. I don't get the impression that Meghan is desperate to return to these shores anytime soon, despite Harry apparently having made that offer to members of his family that he would step up if required while his father is undergoing cancer treatment. What we did learn today is that Harry was so incensed by the decision made by Ravec back in 2020 that he wrote a letter to the Cabinet Secretary, Sir Mark Sedwill, demanding to know exactly who it was that had made that decision.
Right.
And he said, who would put me in a position that no one was willing to put my mother in 23 years ago? And he argued that the risk to him is greater than it was to his mother, with additional layers of racism and extremism. Someone is comfortable with taking accountability for what could happen. I'd like that person's name. So he wanted to know just who is it who says I don't deserve this security.
Right.
I think he felt this was very, very personal.
Right. But again, if I go back to Dai Davies on this one, it hasn't been refused permission to have protection. He just doesn't get it automatically. And I think that's fair enough, because he's now no longer a working royal. He's now put himself in the firing line, if you want to put it that way, by admitting to killing a load of members of the Taliban. You know, I mean, but he's not in any more danger, really, than anybody else is. And if he is, the risk takers and the risk assessors will say, Dai, will they not? He can have the protection while he's here.
Well, again, you're absolutely right. And of course, going back to his late mother, she decided herself she didn't want protection. And it wasn't lack of protection in one sense. It was the lack of professionals in Paris, which led to her untimely death. Right. She wasn't protected by us. She had decided she didn't want royalty protection. She was going through quite a phase at that time, and so on and so forth. But you're absolutely right. Every time he's come here for anything related to royals, he has had protection, and so be it. I really think this should have been decided behind closed doors, without his peak, without his losing it, as it were, 4 years ago. But we're still pursuing this. And as your royal correspondent has said, this is going to cost us way over, I reckon, close to £1 million by the time we've finished, just because he feels entitled. It's time, with great respect, he shut up, got off the scene. For somebody who wants protection so badly, he goes about it very badly indeed. He doesn't keep a low profile. He insists on going to all manner of things in America, where, frankly, if somebody wanted to take him out, that's where I would have advised them to do it, God forbid. Yeah. But what I'm trying to say is, for a man who wants protection, he and his family, and let's face it, the children don't know. They're so young, they don't know whether they want to live in Britain or not. So that's absolute nonsense. And with great respect, he doesn't half talk a lot of nonsense half the time.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, Dai. I could not agree with you more. Thank you very much indeed for selling us all of that. Sarah, let me come back to you and just talk about a couple of the other royal stories, because, of course, this comes after that shocking news yesterday about the death at just the age of 45 of the Prince and Princess and Michael of Kent's son-in-law, I guess he would be. And I imagine this is not, again, another great time for the royal family. As we know, William's off again with some personal problem. We don't know what it is. Not a great time for them to be reminded about the nuisance that is Prince Harry, is it?
I mean, it has been a terrible start to 2024 for the royal family, and another really difficult week, as you've just outlined, Mike. That news last night that Thomas Kingston had been found dead at the age of 45, the husband of Lady Gabriella Windsor, as she was. They married in 2019 in St George's Chapel, just a year after Harry and Meghan had married in the same place. And to all accounts from his friends, everything seemed fine last week. They were out at the National Gallery together, seeming happy, and this has come as a huge shock. Really devastating news. And Prince William, as you mentioned, wasn't at St George's Chapel yesterday for the service of Thanksgiving for his godfather, also Lady Gabriella Windsor's godfather as well, King Constantine of Greece. A lot of questions raised, because obviously there's a huge amount of concern. If someone removes themselves at the last minute from a big event like this, what does that say? Well, we were told it was a personal matter. We were reassured that the Princess of Wales was continuing to do well. It wasn't related to the death of Thomas Kingston, but it remains a mystery why he did have to pull out with just 46 minutes to go from his godfather's service of Thanksgiving, where he was meant to be doing a reading.
Yes, exactly right. And of course, more speculation, which nobody particularly wants to have going on, and everybody says we don't want to speculate, but because inevitably, if you say it's a personal matter, and people have said everything from, well, he could have had a toothache to he could have had a tummy bug to, it could have been one of his children, it could have been any number of things, but they've been quite specific about some stuff lately. It seems to me unusual that they would be so vague, isn't it?
This is the age-old problem with the royal family. They've often grappled with, if you give a little and you let the public in, then that carries on. You have to give more and more. So we've had this information about the King's cancer diagnosis, but then they wanted to stop and not give too much information. We were told that the Princess of Wales had had abdominal surgery, but they didn't want to be giving a running commentary on that or any more updates. Prince William has let his team describe it as a personal matter. But of course, that raises more questions. Right. And we certainly didn't get any answers. They really, really didn't want to speculate on it or elaborate further. And I think because of the backdrop of this, because we're all quite jittery over the state of the royal family at the moment, look at the images yesterday where you've got Prince Andrew front and centre leading the family into church. When William removes himself, you do start to wonder why, because you wouldn't imagine that he would do that unless there was a pretty good reason.
No. And is there any sort of clarity about when his next appearance is meant to be and whether he's going to be at it?
Yeah, we're going to be seeing him over the next couple of days, Mike. He has got 2 planned engagements over the next 2 days, and we are told that he will be back to work for those. So it was a short absence for him. We hadn't seen him since the 18th of February when he went to the BAFTAs, but he is back to work tomorrow. And of course, all eyes will be on him then.
OK. Sarah, good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. Sarah Hewson, TalkTV's royal correspondent there with the lowdown on what's going on with all sorts of members of the family who seem to be having, as she said, a terrible start to the year.